What's going on, guys? It's Greg here. Just wanted to do a quick video on bugging in versus bugging out. So I'm going to start with bugging in. I figured I would give you guys my thoughts on the whole debate, because it's a very popular topic amongst the prepper community. So basically, I'm going to start with my analysis of bugging in. So bugging in, you got your pros and cons, just like with anything in life. There's always pluses and minuses to everything. There's no perfect solution. So you always gotta weigh the pros and cons of everything you do in life. Same thing with survival and prepping. You're gonna have to weigh which one works the best for you. You can't just think like, oh, bugging out is better than bugging in. You just can't think like that. That's what a lot of guys think, like bugging out is superior to bugging in. It's not necessarily the case, and I'm going to talk about that once I analyze bugging out. But, it really comes down to what's the best option for you. Bugging out, may be a good option for certain people, and it may be a bad option for other people. So, just think about what's the best option for you. Don't look at what other people are doing. Maybe some guy has a cabin somewhere, or a very fancy retreat that they spent a lot of money on. Don't get jealous of that. That may not be the best solution for you, depending on where you live and stuff, and your financial situation. So you gotta make the best of what you got. That's all you can do. You can't just get depressed or think that, like, if you don't have like a massive bug out location with a huge compound and seven years worth of food, then you're not going to make it. Just do the best that you can for yourself, at the time, and you're based on your financial situation. Don't get too caught up in getting down on yourself and stuff like that. So I'm going to start with bugging in. So bugging in, the pros to bugging in are going to be, it's the most realistic option for most people, just because financially most people are not going to have a lot of money. They're not going to have a lot of money to basically buy like a piece of land somewhere in a very secluded location, and build a cabin. Most people are prioritizing other things in life. They don't have the money to do that. So bugging in is the most realistic option for most people, and I think that people need to have some type of a bug in plan, because everybody is very focusing on bugging out, and they neglect the fact that you can actually do pretty well if you bug in. In most disasters, you're not going to really need to bug out, unless we're talking about like WROL, some type of a major SHTF event like a World War III, or EMP strike, cyber attack, some type of grid down situation, long-term grid down situation. Then obviously bugging in is going to have more cons, which I'll get to. But for most people, the pros of bugging in is that it's most realistic. It's not expensive. You have your house. All you got to do is just fortify your house. Buy your supplies and store them in your house. Maybe have some caches around the area. Maybe store some supplies with your relatives, or people that you trust. So this way, if your house becomes compromised, you don't lose all your supplies. You want to scatter your supplies in different areas. You don't want to just have it in your house. You don't want to have everything in your house, because if God forbid something were to happen, let's say there's a house fire or whatever. But I'll get into that. Let's see. Another pro about the bugging in is that you're not exposed to the outside hazards and risks. Anytime you're going to leave your home, you're going to obviously expose yourself to the elements. You're going to expose yourself to the environment. You're going to expose yourself to multitude of risks. The risks can come from anything. It could come from nuclear contamination. It can come from biological and chemical contamination. If we're talking about like a NBC type attack where, you know, a chemical weapon or a biological pandemic or biological weapon was detonated. You know, if you're going to be trying to bug out in that type of a situation, you're going to be exposing yourself and your family, you know, to those harsh conditions, you know. And like if there was a nuclear attack or some type of a pandemic, NBC attack, you know, you're going to be exposing yourself and your family to that. So you got to keep that in mind. You know, if you're going to try to bug out or get to your bug out location, you're going to be exposing yourself to that. So bugging in is good because, you know, you don't have to go anywhere. There's no chances that you're not gonna risk being stuck somewhere on the way to your bug out location or getting ambushed. So bugging in is an attractive option in that respects, you know, because you're at home. You don't have to risk going out into the world to try to get somewhere else, which can be very treacherous, you know, especially, you know, right after a major SHTF event. You know, people are going to be panicking, people are going to be desperate. You know, if they see you have a car loaded down with supplies, they may try to ambush you and your family and take all your stuff. You know, they may try to do, there's obviously going to be bad people out there. There's going to be gang members, there's going to be all types of sickos and psychos that are going to be roaming around. You know, so you're going to be exposing yourself to those people, you know, when you try to go out there and you try to go to your bug out location. So you got to keep that in mind. So, you know, so that's one of the major advantages to bugging in, is that, you know, you're not going to be exposing yourself to that. You're going to basically be staying at home, you know, hunkering down, you know, doing some type of security, having some fortifications and security measures in place to protect your house and protect your perimeter. You know, and so it's better in that respects. Now the cons are pretty obvious. You know, the cons are going to be, you know, it could be more dangerous to bug in, you know, depending on, you know, where you live and how your proximity to, let's say, a major urban area, or like a, you know, large population density area. You know, if you live in like a heavily populated area, you know, it's going to be more dangerous to bug in, you know, because your house is going to be targets to, you know, burglaries, you know, looters, you know. And then if we get into the more, you know, hardcore type Mad Max type stuff, then, you know, you're going to be looking at marauders. You're going to be looking at, you know, large gangs that are going to be coming through different areas. You know, particularly if you live in like a suburban area and you're close to like a major city, you know, a lot of the gang members may try to go into the suburbs to try to, you know, loot and take what they always wanted to do and get, you know, some of them may want to get revenge on, you know, prosperous people. They may see you and your house and your family. They may be jealous of that, and this may be their opportunity to finally get, you know, some satisfaction, and you know, they may try to do some bad stuff. So you got to keep that in mind, that, you know, depending on your location, you know, how close you are to an urban area. It doesn't even just have to be an urban area, but also like, you know, any type of a natural hazard. You know, let's say if you live like in Florida and you're right on the coast, you know, or in the Carolinas, you know, you're right near all the hurricanes. You know, or if you live, let's say you live in, you know, close to, like, remember there was that Oroville Dam in California. You know, you live close to like a dam or some type of a water rise area of water, like a water body that can rise quickly, like a river or something. That may also be a danger, you know, because if you try to bug in and there's a river next to your house and the river's starting to rise, you know, you're going to lose all your preps, and you're going to have to, you know, leave your house, and you're going to leave all your preps there, and you're going to be in trouble. So bugging in it really depends on your location. You know, if you're pretty far away from a city, you know, if you're like, you know, good distance away from a city, like most people say, like a gas tank away, you know, but even just, you know, if you're like 50 to 100 miles away from a major city, you're in pretty good shape, you know. You're in pretty good shape. You're not going to really have to worry about like roving gangs and stuff like that. I mean, that's always a possibility, so don't get too confident, obviously, because that's always a possibility. You know, you always want to be alert and be secure and have your security in place, but you're not going to have to worry about, the massive amounts of gangs and violence and stuff if you're further out from the city, or even if you're in like a really really rural area. If you're like in a really secluded area, if you're far away from an urban area, you live in like really isolated places, then you really don't have to worry. That's basically, you're going to be fine. Another thing too is like if you live near like a nuclear power plant is another one, then obviously you don't want to be bugging in if you're like right next to a nuclear power plant. You want to be a safe distance away from any nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants, you're going to want to be a long distance from them. If you want to learn about nuclear power plants, just look at Chernobyl and Fukushima. How those areas got severely contaminated. And in many ways, nuclear power plant meltdowns are actually worse than nuclear bombs, because in a nuclear power plant, when the power plant melts down, the core, what happens in the nuclear plant, now I'm not a nuclear engineer, but I just have basic knowledge of nuclear physics that I learned in school, and just common sense, just through my own research as well. When a nuclear power plant melts down, the reason why it's called a meltdown is that the actual core of the power plant, the nuclear fuel rods, they overheat because the power plant has difficulty keeping them cool. Typically, like nuclear power plants, what happens is they have a cooling system in place that basically cools the nuclear fuel rods. And they also have the control rods. The control rods are made out of graphite, and they can lower them or raise them, and that'll slow the reaction or increase it. But those cooling systems are very important, and that's why the Chernobyl had that problem with the meltdown, because they messed around with the cooling system, and the cooling system malfunctioned, and the rods got too hot. And when the rods get too hot, they just melt through the ground. They melt through the containment dome, and they melt into the ground. And sometimes they can explode from overheating. So basically, all that highly radioactive material is released from the containment dome because it melts through the floor. It melts into the ground. It basically falls through the power plant, melts down, and then if it detonates, that's even worse, because then the nuclear material spews all over the place. But a nuclear power plant failure or meltdown is worse than a nuclear bomb, because the radiation will stay there for hundreds or thousands of years. It's not going to break down, because it's solid material. It's not an explosion. So it's going to be staying around for a while. So if you're near a nuclear power plant, you definitely don't want to bug in. Same thing if you're close to like a nuclear target. If you live close to like a major military base, Washington D.C., NORAD, Strategic Command, Global Strike, Air Force Global Strike, in Louisiana. If you live close to some of those areas, or if you live close to like a nuclear silo, you're gonna want to think about bugging out in that case, because if you're near a nuclear target, that's obviously bad. So like I said, it depends on your location. If you're close to a city, if you're close to a nuclear target, nuclear power plant, any type of natural hazards, or areas that could be subjected to terrorism, you're generally not going to want to bug in. So that's a con right here, is that you're going to be stuck there in your house, and if you're in a dangerous area, you're going to be subjected to, hazards, and then another con here is going to be the fact that, you can lose all your preps. If you're bugging in, and your main strategy is to, bug in, then what's going to happen is you're going to lose all your preps. If something happens and you have all your stuff stored away in your house, if your house becomes compromised, you're going to lose everything. So if you're going to be bugging in, you want to consider, like I said, spreading out your preps in different areas. Have some at some relatives' houses that you trust. Have some, in different locations. Have some caches. Go on to, I'm not going to really get into details with that, for, but there's just use your creativity. You know, think outside the box. Think of places where you could store your preps, you know, and stuff like that. Places you can diversify the location so it's not all in one area. So now I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of bugging out. So stick with me. Alright guys, I'm back here now. So we're going to talk about bugging out, pros and cons now. So the obvious pro of bugging out is that it allows you to evacuate. But another thing too is that your preps are safer, you know, because they're in a location that's away from, let's say, a lot of population center, or you know, areas where there's going to be a lot of people roaming around and burglaries and stuff. So your preps are going to be safer. And then also you can plan your bug out location in advance, you know, so like, you know, you can do research, you can look for certain areas that, you know, are going to be good for bugging out to. You know, you can get yourself a cabin, you can buy an RV and look for places where you can stay with the RV on public land or whatever. You know, you can look for wilderness areas, whatever the situation is. You can go to a relative's house, you know. So, you know, you can plan your bug out location in advance, and it allows you for flexibility to evacuate, you know, versus when you're bugging in, you're stuck wherever you are. You know, if you live in like a major city or close to a major city, you know, or you know, whatever the situation is, some other type of hazard, you know, you're gonna have to stay there. And versus bugging out, you know, obviously you can plan where you want to go and which areas are going to be good for you, and get you to a safer area. You can find a safer area. And the major cons of bugging out is going to be that, you know, a lot of things that people don't realize is, I talked about, you know, being exposed to the outside. That's pretty obvious, you know. So obviously when you're bugging out, you know, you're going to be more exposed, you know, especially when you're trying to get there. So that's a risk, you know, because let's say you go to your bug out location. What happens if you get to your bug out location but you run out of food over there, or something happens, you know, somehow something gets compromised there, somebody else finds your bug out location and gets to it before you? What happens if, you know, a group of gangs come through and they find your bug out location and they, you know, surround you? So you're more exposed when you go to your bug out location. But you know, you can also be ambushed on the way to your bug out location, or you can get stuck, you know, on the way. So that's something to keep in mind, you know. You can get stuck for a variety of reasons. Obviously, you know, you can get ambushed, but you can also get stuck in, let's say, road blockages. Bridges could be shut down. You know, you know, public safety officials may close certain roads, or they may close bridges down. There may be various types of reasons why you would get stuck. You may have a mechanical problem with your vehicle. You know, you may get a flat tire somewhere. You may, you know, so many things can happen on the way to your bug out location. So, you know, that's something you want to keep in mind. You know, that's a major con in my opinion, because what happens if, let's say, you have this awesome bug out retreat and it's, you know, hundreds of miles away from your city, but you got to drive like 7 or 8 hours to get there, or whatever, even 2 or 3 hours. But what happens if you have to do that in the middle of a snowstorm? You know, what happens if there's, you know, if your cabin is somewhere in a secluded area? You got to consider the fact that the roads are not going to be plowed in those places. You know, there may be impassable roads. You know, even if, let's say, there's like a snowstorm in the middle of where you live and you're trying to bug out to your cabin, you know, it's going to be tough. You know, it's going to be tough to go through. You know, there's so many variables there. If you're trying to drive through a major snowstorm and get to your bug out location, you could skid off the road. You can get into an accident. There could be massive traffic jams. You know, there could be a lot of things there, so you want to consider that. You know, that's a major con, in my opinion. That's a major con. So that's basically it for this video, and I'll give you my suggestions real quick. Basically, I think that, you know, ideally you're going to want to have a combination of both, you know. So you should have some preps at home, and then you should have some preps at like your at your bug out location. You know, you should have like some type of a place that you could go to, you know, like a permanent structure. You know, I'm not talking about like a camping spot or, you know, like some type of, you know, area where you could camp or bring an RV. I'm talking about a permanent structure that you can stay at. Either it's a relative's house, or if you have a second house or a cabin, whatever it is, you know, that's going to be your ideal scenario. And then so you're going to want to scatter your preps. So you have some preps at the bug out location. You're going to have some preps at your house, and then you're going to have caches all around, you know, all around your house, as well as around your retreat, you know, your bug out location, because you know you got to consider the fact that you know your bug out location may become compromised, you know, for a variety of reasons, either man-made or natural. So you're going to want to have places to go to, and you're going to want to have supplies that you can retrieve. You know, if you have to, let's say, evacuate your bug out location for whatever reason, you know, you're going to want to have supplies that you can tap into. You don't want to just have everything at your bug out location and everything at your house, you know, because that if one of those, if they get compromised, you know, then you know, you're going to be in trouble. So think about scattering your preps in different areas and have caches that you can turn to if your bug out area gets compromised. So I think that's my suggestion, is a combination of both, and you know, spreading out your preps, and so you know, I'm gonna do another video about considerations for bugging out, you know, and so thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care. God bless.